and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm Gloria Politis of LTC, your host today, and as you can see, I have two guests in the studio. Darcie Boyer, who is the manager of the UMass Lowell Center for Women in Work, but today she's here as the parent of a Lowell public school child and a local activist. And with her is Mickie Dumont, who is a retired teacher from the Lowell Public Schools, and who is with the United Teachers of Lowell. She is the Education Issues Chair. Mm-hmm. And what we're going to be talking about is ballot question 2 and some of the implications and all of the work they've done and beyond reforming education. And so many interesting topics here today. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here, and good to be here under the circumstances we're here.
Yes, a celebration.
Yes, a celebration.
All right.
Well deserved.
All right. Yeah. So why did you get involved so actively in fighting question 2?
Gloria, we actually had no choice. We had to be involved. I had to be involved both as a retired teacher and now as the grandparent of 4 grandchildren who are enrolled in Lowell Public Schools. So I've seen right along the changes that have occurred in public schools, and I'm very concerned about what's happening. I happened to meet Darcie last spring, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Maybe at the Citywide Parent Council, I would.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And we actually got together and we decided to coordinate events and activities. And we've been like side by side ever since.
We have been, and this is a partnership that I want to foster and bring more teachers and parents together, because Absolutely. I think that we should be allies and that we have a lot in common, and I think it's important for us to work together in terms of making our schools what they should be and can be. Mm-hmm. But for me, certainly question 2 was an attack on the public schools. The increase of charter schools, 12 new ones every year, was going to further drain the resources from our public schools, and they are already underfunded. And then to add additional burden to them meant that the kids in the public school, the schools that educate the majority of students, were going to further lose services, curriculum, teachers, and I just couldn't sit back. And I've just been an activist in social justice issues my whole life, pretty much, and this is a big one. Mm-hmm.
So, just to answer for any people who voted the other way, the opponents kept saying that, well, the money follows the student, and therefore you're not losing any money. So, how did you answer that? Obviously, you did it successfully.
We actually do lose quite a bit of money with each student. Yes, money goes with the student to the new charter school, whatever it may be. And the state does reimburse us a portion of that money. It's never fully reimbursed. And the opposing side kept saying, oh, we have the greatest reimbursement plan in the country. We reimburse the districts 225% during the span of 6 years. Unfortunately, the reality of that is maybe in the first year we got 65%. The second year, when we should have gotten 25%, we got 21%. And then years 3 through 6, we got 0%. So, there were big discrepancies with that. On paper, it looked like it was a terrific reimbursement. But even with that, there was another portion, a large portion, that was not. It came right off the top of the budget. And if a child left my classroom in the 3rd grade, I still had to teach all those other children. The school still had to open the door. And it wasn't just my grade, it was every grade, where 1 or 2 children left to go to a charter school. So even though we lost that number of students, we did not lose the cost of running that school. The cost remained the same or even grew with inflation, whatever.
And so that money something has to give when that happens, right? And so unfortunately things that give are the things that are seen as not a priority, right? But they are important. The arts, music, counselors in the schools, all those things that we need. But somehow we have to make it work. And And then the other issue with that, I think, is that was not talked about as much as it should have been, is that the students that the public schools educate also come with a higher cost. So,
That's true.
so we have the English language learners, the special ed students. The charter schools do not take the same number. And they also don't take the most challenging, and that's what public schools do, and that's what they should do. I mean, public funds, if public money is going to go to fund a school, then it should serve all children equally, and that is not what happens.
Yeah, because I think initially, when charter schools began, I think it was back in Lowell, it was in 1994, right after the Ed Reform Act. Initially, they were supposed to take the most needy students who were not making it for whatever reason in the traditional public school. And then they were supposed to have the freedom to not follow all the mandates that the regular public school did. And they could create their own strategies that would work better with these students. And it may have started that way initially, but over time, very slowly, it actually turned out that the most needy students were the ones who were returned to us.
So they would get accepted into a charter school, but
Yes.
then they would
be returned.
they would be what some people call counseled out. So they can't just say, well, we can't teach you because you are a special needs student, right? I mean, they're not allowed to do that. But one thing that would happen is that they would get suspended over and over, or parents would get calls every day. And at some point, it just becomes too much. I mean, how can you go and pick up your child every day? And so you say, well, you take them out, you put them back in the public schools who serve their needs, and the money then stays with the charter school. It doesn't follow back to with the student.
Yeah, they supposedly changed that.
Oh, did they?
That like a year ago.
Okay.
That formula, which after 20-something years, it was probably
That is what they were doing. Yeah.
a good idea that
Yeah.
they changed that. However, what we don't know is if that ever occurred.
Yeah.
Because it's only been in force for a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need to look into that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I had to go through a really rapid education with the whole system, because it's very complicated, and the
It
funding
is, yeah.
structure is complicated, and the mandates are complicated, and but we really had no time. I feel like this whole year I have just been fighting corporate takeover of education, and to be honest, I'm mad about that, right? I mean, I'm a parent who would like to have been doing other things on the weekend, in the evenings, with my child and with my family and in the community, but instead we have all these corporations that are funneling all this money into the Yes campaign, and so we had to form this grassroots organizing effort, and we did. So teachers and parents and community activists all came together.
Yeah, and just to know, when this started in Lowell, each year as teachers, we would find that we were losing more and more services. Like maybe the second or third year, we started to lose paraprofessionals.
I didn't realize
then
that.
We did. Then, because the funds were going, but the school was still running, but we had to cut somewhere. So we started to lose paraprofessionals. Then we would lose the computer teacher. Then we lost the librarian. So every year it was something else that got cut because there wasn't enough money. So I just wanted to point that out because it was noticeable. In some areas I know they lose art teachers, music teachers. That didn't happen with us. But we did lose other resource staff. That hurt.
I can imagine.
It hurt a lot. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't been involved, as I mentioned. I did coordinate a grant at the Center for Field Services, which was the College of Education at UMass Lowell, and that was very late 80s into the 90s before all of this. So, in fact, I did workshops for paraprofessionals and all that. I had no idea that they were all gone because I have no
They weren't
children
all
or
gone,
grandchildren. So.
but they were cut.
Yeah, right.
When I first started at the Bailey School in '93, we had 3 classrooms at each grade level, and every classroom had a paraprofessional.
Right.
Every classroom had one. And then 2 years later, we added another class to each grade level, so there were 4. And then all of a sudden, 2 classrooms shared a paraprofessional. And then it was down to 1 classroom one paraprofessional serviced 4 classrooms, until eventually they were just placed in the kindergarten or in special areas. So very hurtful.
Right. And in case some of our viewers don't know what a paraprofessional does.
It's like the backbone of the classroom. We could not, and we have a hard time working without. They're pulled from one classroom to go to another. They do small groups instruction with the students. They help the teacher with preparing lessons, preparing the supplies and materials for the lessons.
Yep.
Incredibly valuable.
Right.
But they're like a second, almost like a second teacher in the classroom. If I'm working with a group, my paraprofessional would be across the room at another table working with another group. So,
Right.
and we lost that
Right.
in a large way.
Right. And there's such a variety of needs in the public school classroom that you need to work with different groups.
Very diverse.
It is, and that's one of the things that I like about the public schools, right, is that it serves a very diverse population in many ways, whether it's learning style, whether it's race and ethnicity. I think that is one of the powerful things about a public school, right? And that I feel like in some ways the charter school was kind of encouraging a bit of a segregation again in terms of the
Big time.
who is being served, and I feel like that we all benefit. All children, all adults benefit when they are around lots of different people who learn differently. Thankfully, I mean, we're not all the same, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And that's what keeps the classrooms interesting. If the teachers and the classes are allowed to let that foster, and I mean that's certainly another issue, right? Is that with education reform and with the high stakes testing that has come with that.
Another big issue.
Yes, and that's, I mean, I think that part of the narrative was that the schools are failing, right? And we have been told that for over and over and over again.
Not true.
And we don't believe that's true. And so when you say that a school is a failing, right now that's almost all based on a test score. And that is not a good measure of whether a school is successful or not. But unfortunately, because of federal mandates, that is what the schools are under pressure now to keep the test scores up. And so what happens with that is that our curriculum is now being restricted, right? And so social studies and the arts and music and history, science, all those things that make for a full, rich learning environment are not seen as essential, because the math and English language arts are the things that are primarily tested. And so we have this push to, we limit recess time now, we limit lunch time, and all of that really goes towards, because we need to make sure that our test scores are up, because if they're not up, we're punished, right?
We're punished.
So even we serve a very diverse population, but we're punished if we're not able to. But we're also underfunded, right? And so I think that's part of, so we won this ballot initiative, right? And so now what has been talked about is that there's a real need to now work on the funding mechanisms and the foundation budget, because we have been underfunded for so many years. That it's time to prioritize education. I mean, it's not all about charter schools. It's about the fact that we, as a people and as a government, do not prioritize the needs of education.
It's not all about the charter schools, but Darcie and I have been like attached at the hip
Yes.
since July.
Charter schools brought us together.
and we've done so much organizing to get teachers, paraprofessionals, school staff, parents, community members engaged in learning. We're just so gratified that when we made the phone calls, when we knocked on the doors, people were really happy to learn about, what the issues really are. And we had some people who said, "Oh no, our parents need choice, and I want my kids to have the choice of a charter," and that's fine. We respect that, but what we were fighting for is full funding for the public schools, and don't create new schools on the backs of the public schools.
Right, and I think that one of the things that there was some confusion about is that this wasn't necessarily a referendum on charter schools, right? It wasn't
No,
whether they're
correct.
good or bad necessarily.
And that's what it turned into.
And that is what it turned into. And it wasn't going to impact the charter schools that exist now. And we have a cap, and there's still room under the current cap to open more charter schools. So within the state, at least.
At least 40 more charter
Right.
schools can be added right now.
Oh.
as the
And
cap exists.
so what was the need and what was the pressure, you know? And so people,
I think we know
yes,
what the need was.
Yeah.
And it was just blatantly unfair because the purpose of the original charter school was, like I said, to help the kids who needed the most help. But what it's turned into is it's becoming a replacement for public schools, and that should not be the case.
and yeah. And as a parent, I'm very happy that the teachers in my son's schools are unionized and that they are have a voice. And one of the things that was that's very important to note is that this was definitely a union busting move, right?
Absolutely.
So charter schools are not, the teachers are not unionized. They're not even required to be certified.
Absolutely.
So that's a great cost savings, but at the expense of workers, of teachers, and at the expense of students, because having protections for teachers who may need to go against the administration for some reason, who need to speak out because they feel like something's not right, and have their rights protected is actually a benefit to students. And I personally, as a parent, I'm glad that our public school teachers are unionized.
I am too.
and-
And the teachers who have the most difficulty with that are the teachers who are new in their first 3 years, because they actually, according to the Ed Reform Act, they can be let go at any time. So for them, it's a serious concern. They may be part of a union, but they're still not really comfortable about speaking up about issues. So they might go to a veteran teacher and say, gee, you know, this doesn't seem right. Can you help, you know, getting support with this? But at the same time, they're afraid to put themselves out there because the first 3 years, for any reason, they can be let go. And they don't have, the principals don't have to have a reason. They
That's
can just
amazing.
say, you won't be back next year, which is not a good feeling
No.
for people in their first 3 years.
No, it's not attractive to come into teaching for the first 3
No,
years.
absolutely.
Right.
So that's an issue.
Right. So, I would say that there are charter schools, and obviously they're attracting students for some reason. What can the public schools do to make themselves more attractive, if you will? Since you're talking about underfunding and all of that, what are your
Well, for one
goals, and how are you approaching them for?
For one thing, number one, they could receive a little more positive press. We don't really get much positive press. In the local newspaper, it's very limited, very limited. We do have a section every Sunday where, you know, special events are noted, but invariably, we just had a huge first book event that was held out at the Elks.
40,000 new books went out to
40,000 brand new books were distributed to Lowell Public School.
through the
Teachers
teachers
and children.
union. Yeah.
There was an announcement about it in the newspaper, but then afterwards, there's been nothing. I don't know if something's coming. If something's going to be printed, that would be great. But we need more positive.
We do, and I think though also, again, this goes back to ed reform, right? And also the initial reasons behind charter schools was that they were supposed to be able to innovate, right? So my question is, why are the public schools not given the same freedom and flexibility to innovate? I mean,
Excellent question.
right,
Yes.
and so it's like it's designed to fail, right? So we underfund the schools, we put all kinds of restrictions on what they're allowed to do. People say the schools are now not serving the needs of my child, so I need to find an alternative. So you design a system, you underfund it, it fails, and then you're able to open up private corporate backed schools. I mean, it's kind of the same story, right, with many public services, with public transportation, with all of those things, where there is an incentive among corporations to privatize those services, and public schools are no different. I mean, it's at the higher education level as well, right? So I think we have to acknowledge that there's some design in this. There's something behind that.
There was also another prerequisite for the charter schools when they began. They were required to share back to public schools any of the new strategies and innovative programs that they developed for these students. That never has happened. At least it never happened.
No, and I think that actually there are now charter school teachers are supposed to sign some sort of non-disclosure.
So that they don't talk about.
Right.
So, I mean, that goes against,
Right.
goes against
So
the whole grain of,
the original idea behind charter schools is not what has happened. And that is not to say, I know that there are parents and teachers or parents and students here in Lowell that are having a good experience
absolutely.
in the charter schools that they're
Absolutely.
in.
And this has nothing to do with
that is not,
current
but
charter schools.
But
and
the
programs.
issue is that public schools do and should be the primary educators, and they need to be funded and supported in the same way and greater, because it's a public school that is required to serve the needs of all children. That's what that's what I want my public money to go towards. I do not want it to go to a private corporation that is able to be selective in who it educates and how it educates that child. So, personally speaking, as a parent and as someone who pays taxes towards the schools.
Right.
So.
And as you say, you've lost personnel, that kind of thing. And I was mentioning to you that when I was coordinating that ESL teacher training, which was English as a second language, we had one for elementary and then one for middle school. I was also doing workshops with teachers who were trying to do this kind of innovation. The topic for the year was integrated multicultural curriculum, so that they had the art and music and science and English and all of the teachers, working together for and arranging the curriculum so that they could work together and teach the whole child, if you will. In fact, that was the name of, I think, of the little book that we put out, Educating the Whole Child. And then MCAS came in. And some still tried to strive in that direction. In fact, we did a video with one of the schools on that. But, how do you get that back, if you will,
Well, I
to
think
compete with
Yep, that's the
the
next
charter
part of
schools?
this movement, right?
That's
I mean, there's a
correct. We
huge,
need to get that.
there are groups all across the country who are really talking and thinking about this. There are places in New York City or New York State and others that have strong opt-out movements, so opting out of the tests. That's kind of it. It almost seems like it's going to have to be a mass movement of people refusing to
definitely
take the
is.
test, because they don't seem to be willing to listen to the teachers and the parents and the students who are saying, this is not healthy, that's not good. And actually, Mickie, I wanted to ask you, one of the things about the testing that is challenging for teachers, and I'm still unclear whether it's the same in Massachusetts as other places, are teacher evaluations tied to test scores here in Mass?
As of this moment in time, no.
Okay.
But with the new evaluation system, which came in 2010, I believe, it's supposed to be tied, but there's been so much pushback, not only by teachers but by administrators, that this just doesn't make any sense to tie a student.
Although this is happening in other states, and so
It definitely is.
Right.
And all
Right.
research says it's just not appropriate at all. Which, I mean, obviously, you have students who are coming from homes where there's a lot of trauma, and there are physical and medical conditions. It's just crazy to think that my performance as a teacher is going to be based on maybe students who they're at this level here. going to take them a longer time to get up to this level, but they may at some point get to that level. But until that point, we just take them as far as we can and just keep going. But to tie that to teacher evaluations is insane.
And also think about it from the perspective of a student, right, who's constantly being told that they are failing, that they are not achieving, right? They've come in at this a certain level, and they have made amazing progress, whether it's in terms of learning English or whatever it is. But it's not because of the way that testing is done and the standards are done. They are now considered failures, and they're bringing the school down. And that it's just, it breaks it really hurts to think about that.
Another case in point is we have newcomers who come to the city of Lowell, and they go right into the classroom. Some of them barely speak English. The first year that they're in the district, they're not tested. But we were just on a tour of one of the schools, and the principal was telling us, and I asked, I said, at what point are they tested with the MCAS? She said, their second year.
It's
You know,
just,
they don't even speak English the first year.
Right.
And their scores are going to be tied to the school, and that's all part of what's wrong with the system.
and so again, a city like Lowell is being punished basically because
Correct.
we do welcome and we do have a diverse
these
population.
kids do grow.
We have refugees coming to this city, right? And we serve them, and it's wonderful, and I'm happy we do. And then, but to then make them, take these tests that make them feel like they're stupid.
I know.
It's that
It's not
adds
right.
to the trauma.
It
I
doesn't-
would say
yeah.
that adds to the
It
trauma.
doesn't help them grow.
Yes.
For sure.
So
But that's one of the points that we'll be working on
Right.
we
throughout
will.
this year.
Mhm.
Right. So we just have about a minute left. How would you encourage people to get involved and get behind this movement?
We are starting a new education justice group here with all the people who've been active. So Lowell Education Justice Alliance at gmail.com. I just set that email up. That's all we have right now. But you can Lowell Education Justice Alliance at gmail.com. Also Citywide Parent Council, right? District level teacher or voices for parents in
Are
the
you
schools.
on that council?
I'm,
this point?
It's in the, yeah, we'll see. We're still.
And so parents can come to.
Yes, every month. Oh, yes, and so get in touch with us and we'll hook you up and we'll, there's a lot that needs to be done. But
There
our
really is.
schools,
We actually set up a forum here.
Yep.
Was it last spring or?
Yep.
Early spring?
Well, we're going to need to wrap up.
Okay.
So we will put that up, that information up
Great.
so people will have it.
All right.
And thank
Very
you so
good.
much for sharing.
Thank you for having
thank
us.
you.
Welcome.
That's great. Thanks.
And we'll see you next time on the next Thinking Out Loud.